In 1920, Edgar Cayce and friend David Kahn had visions of making millions as wildcatters, with their oil profits funding Edgar's dream hospital project. But these would be some of the toughest years of Cayce's life.
Well, you know, I often think of his 3 years in Texas as his wilderness experience. I think he was wandering around in the wilderness.
The Cayce Petroleum Company was founded in San Saba, and drilling began on oil leases Edgar had recommended in his readings. But the oil never came. Months turned into years, and it got so grim that Edgar's associates started wearing guns when some of the wells were sabotaged by cutthroat competitors. Cayce came to the sobering realization that his psychic powers had become unreliable. They had dramatically failed him and turned the noble mission to finance his hospital into a colossal defeat. Absent for 3 long years, some would claim Edgar had failed his family as well.
Certainly to put my grandfather on a pedestal as someone without human frailties or someone that had all-knowing abilities and never make mistakes with his readings, that was not the Edgar Cayce that I have come to understand.
Cayce refused to return empty-handed. He crisscrossed the country searching for money and finally raised a pledge for $60,000 for the hospital to be built in Birmingham, Alabama. But by now, Cayce's readings had indicated that the hospital must be built in the obscure resort town of Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Well, he said that the ocean had a good effect some way on his psychic abilities, or in any psychic, that it was a good place for him to be.
The Birmingham offer was promptly withdrawn. Beaten, Edgar finally rejoined his family in Selma. He returned to what he knew, photography, teaching Sunday school, and tried to forget his fundraising failures. But this peaceful routine ended abruptly. In 1923, after meeting an Ohio businessman and potential hospital investor, Edgar uprooted his family once again and moved to Dayton, Ohio. It was yet another gamble, as it was for an 18-year-old Selma native who felt her destiny belonged with the Cayces. She was Edgar's new stenographer. Her name was Gladys Davis.
Gladys was kind of like one of the family, and she had a phenomenal memory. She could, like a computer, she could tell you who had a reading on what date and what it was about.
In Dayton, Cayce underwent a radical change. During a reading for his potential investor, Edgar was asked deep metaphysical questions about the nature of the human soul. Cayce, in trance, began to talk of his questioner's past lives.
Well, this really blew Edgar over, you know, because this ran counter not only to what he believed, he said, as a Christian, but what he taught as a Sunday school teacher.
Edgar knew the Gospels well and wondered why the Bible never mentioned reincarnation, if indeed it was real. Cayce began to study the scriptures in a new context.
And he said it soon became evident to him that there were places in the Bible which, if you read them and read them carefully, you could see that they supported the idea of reincarnation.
Cayce's readings on past lives became known as life readings, as opposed to the physical readings he previously had been giving.
And so he started giving readings for everybody in his family, and they'd all had past lives according to his readings. And many of their lives, they were together in some other place, ancient Egypt primarily.
Edgar began studying other beliefs, from Hinduism to the religions of ancient Egypt and Greece. He would withhold judgment on reincarnation for some years. It was, after all, unprovable. But Cayce wondered whether his readings on past lives could be just as accurate as one of his physical readings, which he and others were able to verify. With so many questions at hand, Cayce's future seemed inescapable. In 1923, at 46, he became a full-time psychic, a vocational choice that few understood, many ridiculed, and added little to his bank account.
He wasn't a very good money handler himself. I mean, the money would go through his hands just like sand from the beach. He would cause Mother a lot of problems sometimes.
Gertrude, who had come from money back in Kentucky, would struggle her whole life with her husband's financial woes. When the Dayton money source dried up, she was worn out. She felt no reason to be optimistic when a new financial angel emerged. Morton Blumenthal and his brother Edwin ran a successful Wall Street brokerage firm. After an introduction from David Kahn, Morton became an instant Cayce supporter. He offered to fund the Virginia Beach Hospital and buy the Cayces a home near the beach. It was almost too good to be true.
It seemed like a little fishing village when we first came to the beach. It didn't look like, what Dad said it was going to be, a thriving community.
Edgar and family settled on 35th Street. The next summer, construction began on the Cayce Hospital, and the sleepy town began to buzz about this curious new enterprise. In partnership with the Blumenthals, Edgar began a corporation, the Association of National Investigators. Science, education, health, and spiritual awakening were the stated pursuits. This activity proved a tonic for Edgar. He had just returned from the Hopkinsville funeral of his beloved mother, Carrie. Edgar's father, alone now and past errors forgiven, came to live with his son. In November of 1928, Edgar's dream became reality. The Cayce Hospital, the only institution of its kind in the world where physical ills would be diagnosed via psychic revelation, was dedicated. It had been a long and difficult road for Edgar Cayce. Here was all he dreamed and desired, or so it seemed.